Police officers humiliate Jackie Chan at a small-town diner, mocking the quiet maintenance worker and shoving him around like he's nothing. The corrupt cops laugh as they terrorize the 69-year-old man, calling him racial slurs while shaking down the waitress for protection money. But when these dirty officers break into his apartment looking for leverage, they discover something that turns their blood to ice. This humble old man is Jackie Chan himself. The legendary martial artist has been living in peaceful retirement. But these thugs just crossed a line they can never uncross. While the crooked sergeant plants evidence to frame him, Jackie realizes these aren't just corrupt cops. They're human traffickers holding innocent girls captive. The officers think they're hunting a helpless old immigrant, but they've actually awakened a warrior who spent 50 years perfecting the art of destroying evil with his bare hands. Their smuggled victims are crying for help while the martial arts master prepares to remind the world why legends never truly retire. What happens when dirty cops pick the wrong fight with the wrong hero? Will these traffickers survive learning that some skills only get deadlier with age? What happened next would terrorize these corrupt officers for the rest of their pathetic lives. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced the Montana morning at precisely 6:15 a.m., just as it had every Tuesday for the past 3 years. Jack Chin's weathered hand moved with surprising grace to silence the intrusion, his movements carrying the fluid precision of someone who had spent decades training his body to respond without thought. The sparse apartment above Henderson's hardware store revealed its occupant's character in careful details. Every item had its place. Work boots aligned perfectly beside the door, a single coffee mug waiting beside an ancient percolator, and a small wooden shrine positioned reverently on a corner desk. The shrine held faded photographs face down except for one, which caught the morning light filtering through threadbare curtains. The image showed a young martial artist in tournament gear, but shadows obscured the face. Jack rose from his narrow bed, his 69-year-old frame moving through stretches that spoke of lifelong discipline. His salt and pepper hair, kept neat despite its age, caught the light as he bowed respectfully toward the shrine, a ritual that had anchored his mornings since arriving in Cedar Falls. The man who stared back from the cracked bathroom mirror bore little resemblance to the legends whispered in distant corners of the world. Weathered skin mapped a life of hard work, while calloused hands told stories of both combat and honest labor. The small scar above his left eyebrow, earned decades ago on a movie set, remained the only visible hint of his extraordinary past. Jack dressed with the same methodical care he applied to everything. Khaki work pants pressed despite their age, a simple button-down shirt, and steel-toed boots that had carried him through countless repairs at the Riverside Community Center. His reflection showed a humble maintenance worker preparing for another day of anonymity, exactly as he preferred. The wallet he placed in his pocket contained just enough for breakfast and little else, while his keys jingled softly as he prepared to face another day in the life he had carefully constructed. 3 years of quiet mornings, of being invisible among good people who asked no uncomfortable questions about his past. Outside, Cedar Falls awakened with the gentle rhythm of small-town life. Shopkeepers raised their metal grates, preparing for another day of serving neighbors who had become family. Jack's journey down Main Street followed the same route it had for over 1,000 mornings, each step a meditation in ordinary living. "Morning, Jack," called Betty from the flower shop, her voice carrying the warmth reserved for those who had earned a community's trust through small acts of kindness. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson," Jack replied, his accented English carrying perfect pronunciation of her name. The language barrier that occasionally frustrated him never extended to remembering what mattered to others that he paused outside Mel's diner, checking his watch with the precision of someone whose entire life had once been scheduled to the second. 6:45 a.m., exactly as planned. Through the large windows, he could see Dorothy Wellington moving between tables with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent decades caring for others. The brass bell above the door chimed his arrival, announcing the beginning of what should have been just another peaceful Tuesday in the carefully constructed life of Jack Chun, maintenance worker. The warm scent of coffee and bacon embraced him as he stepped inside. unaware that this morning would shatter 3 years of hard-won anonymity forever. "Morning, Jack." The usual. Dorothy Wellington's voice carried the genuine affection of someone who had never met a stranger she couldn't mother. At 62, her graying brown hair was pulled back in its customary practical style, and her pink Mel's Diner uniform showed the pride she took in honest work. Jack settled into his regular booth, the worn vinyl familiar beneath him. "Black coffee. 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast," he confirmed with a slight smile. The routine had become a comfortable rhythm in his carefully ordered life. From behind the grill, Frank Martinez raised a spatula in greeting. The 68-year-old cook's military bearing remained unmistakable despite the civilian apron tied around his lean waist. His gray crew cut and weathered face spoke of experiences that went far beyond short-order cooking, though he wore his current role with quiet dignity. "That heating system acting up again at the community center?" Frank asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being listened to. "The boiler needs attention," Jack replied, accepting the steaming coffee Dorothy placed before him. "Should have it running properly by afternoon." Dorothy's smile faltered slightly as she wiped down the already clean table. "Still haven't heard from Lisa. It's been 3 weeks now. I know she's busy with college, but she always calls on Sundays." Jack's attention sharpened imperceptibly, his maintenance worker facade never slipping even as trained instincts noted the worry lines deepening around Dorothy's kind eyes. "Perhaps she is studying for examinations?" "Maybe," Dorothy sighed, though her expression suggested she didn't quite believe it. "That girl's always been responsible about staying in touch. Ever since her mother died, she's been all I have left." Frank emerged from the kitchen carrying Jack's breakfast, his movements economical and precise. "Been some unusual activity around town lately," he mentioned casually, though his eyes held the alertness of someone who noticed everything. "Unfamiliar vehicles, people asking questions about local families." The comment hung in the air like smoke, meaningful to those who understood how to read between lines. Jack filed the information away while maintaining his role as simple maintenance worker, though every sense had sharpened to full awareness. "Probably just county officials checking on something," Dorothy suggested, but her voice carried doubt. The three of them had developed an unspoken understanding over the months. Frank with his military background, Jack with his careful observations, and Dorothy with her deep roots in community knowledge. Jack ate methodically, savoring both the food and the peaceful normalcy of the moment. These morning conversations had become precious to him, representing the simple human connections he had sacrificed during his years of fame and endless travel. Here, he was simply Jack Chun, a man valued for his reliability and quiet kindness rather than his legendary past. The diner filled with its usual morning crowd, ranchers grabbing coffee before heading to distant fields, shop owners sharing local gossip, and retirees extending breakfast into social hour. Jack nodded to familiar faces while maintaining the respectful distance that had characterized his 3 years in Cedar Falls. "You're good people, Jack," Dorothy said as she refilled his coffee. "This town's lucky to have you." The simple words carried weight that Dorothy couldn't possibly understand. For a man who had once been celebrated by millions, being valued by one honest waitress felt like a gift beyond measure. As Jack finished his breakfast, the familiar rhythm of another ordinary morning played out around him. Frank returned to his grill, Dorothy tended to other customers, and the gentle sounds of small-town life continued their comforting symphony. The brass bell above the door remained silent, guarding the peace that would soon be shattered forever. The brass bell's chime at 7:23 a.m. carried a different tone, sharp, discordant, cutting through the diner's comfortable atmosphere like a blade. Jack's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips as 3 police officers entered Mel's Diner, their presence immediately shifting the room's energy from warm to tense. Sergeant Rick Brennan led the trio, his thick build and predatory smile announcing trouble before he spoke a word. At 45, he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who had learned to use his badge as a weapon rather than a symbol of service. Behind him, Officer Dale Morrison's nervous energy manifested in constantly moving eyes and fidgeting hands, while Officer Troy Vasquez followed with the silent menace of a man who preferred violence to conversation. The morning regulars sensed the change immediately. Conversations quieted, Newspapers rustled as readers sought refuge behind headlines, and the comfortable buzz of community interaction died like a candle in cold wind. "Morning, Dorothy," Brennan called out, his voice carrying false friendliness that fooled no one. "Coffee for 3. We need to discuss some community safety issues." Dorothy's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the coffee pot, but her voice remained steady. "Of course, officers. Counter or booth? Counter's fine. We won't be staying long." Brennan's smile never reached his eyes as he surveyed the diner's occupants, his gaze lingering on each face like a predator cataloging potential prey. Jack continued eating with apparent calm, though every muscle had coiled into readiness. Through the window's reflection, he observed the officers' positioning, their body language, the way Morrison's hand never strayed far from his weapon despite being in a peaceful civilian establishment. "Beautiful place you've got here," Brennan continued as Dorothy poured their coffee. "Be a real shame if anything happened to it. Accidents, you know. Gas leaks, electrical fires, vandalism. Lots of dangerous things can happen to businesses that don't take proper precautions." The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. Frank emerged from the kitchen, his military bearing more pronounced as he assessed the situation with the tactical awareness of someone who had faced hostile forces before. "What kind of precautions?" Dorothy asked, though her voice suggested she already understood the game being played. "Oh, the usual safety measures," Brennan replied, stirring his coffee with deliberate slowness. "Professional security consultation, regular safety inspections, that sort of thing. Very reasonable rates, say $500 a month. Small price for peace of mind." Morrison shifted uncomfortably, his conscience apparently not completely dead despite his participation in the shakedown. Vasquez remained motionless, his dead eyes fixed on Dorothy with the intensity of a snake watching a mouse. "I barely make rent as it is," Dorothy protested, her maternal warmth replaced by the steel that had helped her survive decades of hard work and harder times. "I can't afford protection money." "Protection money?" Brennan's laugh carried no humor. "This is a legitimate business consultation, Dorothy. Though I suppose if you're not interested in our services, you'll have to rely on the regular police response times. And those can be unpredictable when emergencies arise." The diner's other customers began leaving, sensing trouble they wanted no part of. Jack remained seated, his breakfast forgotten as he watched 3 men with badges transform a place of comfort into a scene of intimidation. Frank's knuckles whitened as he gripped his spatula like a weapon, but experience told him that direct confrontation would only escalate the situation. Jack's presence at his regular booth provided an anchor of calm in the growing storm. "I need time to think about it," Dorothy said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," Brennan replied, his tone suggesting that thinking was optional. "Take all the time you need. Just remember, accidents have a way of happening to people who don't think carefully enough." When Brennan's hand shot across the counter to grab Dorothy's wrist, the morning's peace shattered completely. "Maybe you need a little encouragement to think faster." Jack set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision and spoke for the first time since the officer's arrival. "Please let her go." Every eye in the diner turned toward Jack as he rose slowly from his booth, the simple movement carrying an authority that made the air itself seem to thicken. His voice, though accented, carried crystal clarity. "The lady said no. Perhaps you should respect that." Brennan released Dorothy's wrist and pivoted toward Jack, his predatory instincts recognizing a new target. The size difference was immediately apparent. Brennan outweighed the older man by at least 50 pounds and stood 4 inches taller. To the sergeant's eyes, this should be easy. Well, Brennan drawled, his voice dripping with manufactured menace. "Looks like Grandpa Chop Suey wants to play hero." Morrison and Vasquez flanked Jack automatically, their positioning designed to intimidate through overwhelming presence. Jack remained perfectly still, his hands visible and non-threatening. "I apologize for interfering. I simply ask that you treat the lady with respect." The humble words and deferential tone only fed Brennan's confidence. Here was an easy victim, an old man who could be humiliated publicly to send a message to anyone else who might consider interfering with police business. "You know what your problem is, old man." Brennan stepped closer, his breath reeking of stale cigarettes and morning coffee. "You don't understand how things work in America. Here, We respect authority. Maybe where you come from, people stick their noses where they don't belong, but this is our town. The racial slurs that followed were delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who had never faced consequences for his words. Jack absorbed each insult without reaction, his face maintaining the serene mask he had perfected over 3 years of careful anonymity. Morrison shifted uncomfortably, some part of his conscience recoiling from the naked bigotry, but fear of Brennan's wrath kept him silent. Vasquez watched with dead eyes, waiting for orders to escalate the violence that seemed inevitable. "Please," Jack said quietly, "I do not wish trouble. Perhaps we can discuss this calmly." His apparent weakness was blood in the water to sharks. Brennan's shove sent Jack stumbling backward into his booth, coffee spilling across the table in a dark stain that mirrored the corruption spreading through the room. "Stay out of police business, old man, or you'll find out what happens to troublemakers in Cedar Falls." Brennan's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed through fear. Vasquez chose that moment to step deliberately on Jack's foot, grinding his heel down while Morrison accidentally swept Jack's breakfast to the floor. The plate shattered against the linoleum, scattering eggs and toast in a mess that symbolized the destruction of peace. Jack's hands clenched into fists for just a moment before conscious control reasserted itself. Through the window, he could see curious townspeople gathering, drawn by the commotion. Dorothy stood frozen behind the counter, tears of frustration and helplessness streaming down her cheeks. Frank's jaw worked silently, every military instinct screaming for action while wisdom counseled restraint. The choice was clear. Jack could end this humiliation in seconds, but doing so would expose not only himself but endanger every innocent person in the diner. These men wore badges, carried weapons, and clearly had no qualms about using both against anyone who opposed them. So Jack Chun, who had once been celebrated as one of the world's greatest martial artists, allowed himself to be humiliated by 3 corrupt officers while his heart burned with carefully controlled rage. "I am sorry," he said to Dorothy, to Frank, to the watching townspeople. "I did not mean to cause trouble." The officers laughed as they headed for the door, their cruel amusement echoing in the sudden silence. As Brennan paused at the threshold, he delivered his parting shot. "Remember this, old man. Next time, mind your own business, or we'll teach you some manners you won't forget." The brass bell chimed their departure, but its sound brought no relief. Jack stood slowly, helping Dorothy clean up the spilled coffee while his eyes promised a reckoning that would come when innocent lives were no longer at risk. Through the window, he memorized their patrol car's license plate number, filing away details that would matter when the time for action finally arrived. Jack walked his usual route to the Riverside Community Center, but today every step carried the weight of controlled fury. The morning air felt different against his skin, charged with the electricity that preceded storms. 3 blocks ahead, the officer's patrol car remained parked outside Mel's diner, their cruel laughter drifting through open windows. Morrison stood beside the vehicle, nervously smoking while checking his phone every few seconds. Brennan's voice carried on the morning breeze as he conducted a hushed phone conversation, words like collection schedule and problem elimination reaching Jack's trained ears. The casual discussion of violence confirmed what Jack had already suspected. These weren't simply corrupt cops, but something far more dangerous. At the community center, Jack descended into the basement where the heating system waited. The familiar mechanical challenges should have provided therapeutic distraction, but today his mind remained razor-sharp, processing every detail of the morning's encounter. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, removing access panels and examining the maze of pipes that kept the building warm. Within minutes, Jack's expert eye identified something that made his blood run cold. The heating system hadn't failed. From age or neglect, someone had deliberately sabotaged it. Fresh scratches marred the pipe joints, recent damage disguised to look accidental. Tool marks showed where connections had been loosened just enough to cause gradual failure. Jack knelt beside the boiler, his trained senses cataloging evidence that others would miss. Cigarette butts lay scattered in dark corners, different brands from what Morrison had been smoking. Fast food wrappers bore dates from the past 2 weeks. Most disturbing were the impressions in the dusty floor, showing where people had been forced to sit or lie down for extended periods. This basement had been used as a temporary holding facility, Jack retrieved his old camera from his work bag, carefully documenting every piece of evidence. Years of maintaining anonymity had taught him the value of preparation, and some instincts transcended retirement. The photographs captured angles, distances, and details that would matter if his suspicions proved correct. Above his head, footsteps announced Administrator Betty Walsh's arrival. Her phone conversation filtered through the building's ancient ventilation system. Words about increased police patrols and missing persons reports, creating a chilling picture. Someone had been asking uncomfortable questions about girls who had vanished from the community. Jack worked methodically on the heating repairs while his mind assembled pieces of a larger puzzle. The sabotage, the evidence of human occupation. The officer's discussion of collections. Everything pointed toward an operation that used official authority as cover for something unspeakable. Through the basement's single window, Jack spotted the patrol car making its third pass of the morning. They were watching him now, no longer dismissing him as a harmless old man who had learned his lesson. Their attention carried the focused intensity of predators who had identified a potential threat. Jack completed the heating repairs with professional efficiency, but his movements carried new purpose. 3 years of peaceful anonymity were ending, and the warrior he had tried to bury was awakening with each passing hour. As he climbed the basement stairs, Jack checked his watch. For 30 p.m., time to head home and plan for whatever the evening might bring. Behind him, the restored heating system hummed to life, but ahead lay challenges that no amount of mechanical expertise could repair. The patrol car was waiting when he emerged. Jack climbed the narrow stairs to his apartment, each step measured and deliberate despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. At the landing, he paused before his door, noting immediately what others would miss. The door stood slightly ajar, exactly 2 inches wider than he had left it. After 3 years of meticulous routine, such details screamed danger to his trained awareness. He pushed the door open carefully, every sense alert for threats that might lurk within his sanctuary. The apartment appeared undisturbed at first glance, but Jack's expert eye caught subtle violations of his precisely ordered world. A book spine had been turned backward on his shelf. His coffee mug sat 2 inches left of its usual position. Dust patterns on his desk showed where items had been moved and carefully replaced. They had been thorough, but not thorough enough for someone who had spent decades noticing details that meant the difference between life and death. Jack moved systematically through his sparse living space, cataloging every intrusion. His clothes remained folded but showed signs of searching. Kitchen items bore fingerprint smudges on surfaces he kept meticulously clean. Even his bed had been examined, the covers replaced but not quite matching his hospital corner precision. The shrine on his corner desk revealed the true scope of their discovery. His photographs had been examined and repositioned, no longer face down as he always kept them. The searchers had seen everything: tournament photos from the 1970s and 1990s showing a young Jackie Chan in victory poses, newspaper clippings celebrating martial arts championships, and the Medal of Honor from the International Martial Arts Federation that he had never been able to display publicly. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the frame containing his most precious photograph, his daughter Sarah, laughing beside him at a tournament when she was 12. The image had been moved, examined, probably photographed as evidence of his true identity. Even in death, his child couldn't escape the consequences of his past. Behind the photographs, Jack discovered something that hadn't been there when he left for work: a small electronic device, crudely attached to the back of his shrine. The surveillance equipment was police-grade but hastily installed, suggesting panic rather than careful planning. They knew who he was now, but they were scrambling to understand the implications. Jack disabled the device with practiced efficiency, his fingers remembering skills he hadn't used in years. The technology revealed more than his watchers intended: serial numbers traced to law enforcement suppliers, frequency settings that matched police communication bands. These weren't federal agents conducting legitimate surveillance, but local corruption expanding into dangerous territory. As he examined his violated sanctuary, memories flooded back unbidden. Tournament victories that had brought him fame and responsibility he never wanted. Movie stunts that risked his life for entertainment. The phone call that shattered everything when Sarah died in a car accident while he performed for cameras half a world away. Jack carefully repositioned his photographs, maintaining the illusion that their search had gone undetected. But the shrine now felt different, no longer a private memorial but evidence in someone else's investigation. His daughter's memory had been contaminated by forces that would use even sacred things as weapons. Through his window, Jack observed the street below with professional assessment. 3 vehicles had appeared since his arrival: the patrol car, an unmarked sedan, and a panel van positioned to block potential escape routes. At least 6 men moved with tactical coordination, surrounding his building while trying to appear casual. Jack touched his daughter's photograph one final time, silently promising that her memory would not be dishonored by what was coming. The peaceful retirement he had built in Cedar Falls was ending, but he would not go quietly into whatever darkness these corrupt officers had planned. Heavy footsteps echoed in the stairwell outside, confirming that his time for preparation had expired. Jack moved to his darkened window, watching as tactical positions solidified around his building. The street had transformed into a military operation, with unmarked vehicles blocking escape routes while men in plainclothes coordinated through hand signals and radio whispers that carried through the evening air. Brennan stood beside the patrol car, his earlier swagger replaced by nervous energy as he spoke rapidly into his radio. Morrison and Vasquez flanked the building's rear exit, their positioning revealing training that went beyond standard police academy instruction. 3 additional men Jack didn't recognize completed the perimeter, professionals whose movements suggested military or paramilitary backgrounds. Through his walls, radio chatter leaked from the officers' communications. Words like permanent solution and making problems disappear painted a chilling picture of their intentions. This wasn't an arrest operation, but an execution disguised as law enforcement action. Jack's tactical mind processed the implications with crystalline clarity. They planned to plant drugs in his apartment, claim he resisted arrest violently, then kill him in self-defense. The narrative would be simple: elderly immigrant with criminal history attacks police officers and pays the ultimate price for his violence. The irony wasn't lost on him. Jackie Chan, who had spent his career choreographing fights to entertain millions, now faced real violence from men who had perverted the very system meant to protect society. Jack moved efficiently through his apartment, gathering essential items. His old camera went into one pocket, containing evidence from the community center basement. Cash reserves hidden throughout the apartment filled another pocket, enough to survive off the grid if necessary. From beneath his mattress, he retrieved a small leather pouch containing 6 throwing stars, his only remaining weapons from a life he thought he'd left behind. He changed from his work clothes into dark, flexible garments that would allow full movement without restriction. The transformation was subtle but complete. Jack Chan, the maintenance worker, disappeared, replaced by someone whose every motion carried lethal potential. Through his walls, he heard the assault team's final preparations. Boots on stairs, weapons being checked, voices coordinating entry points and fields of fire. They were professionals, but they were also overconfident. Years of using badges to intimidate civilians had made them forget that some people fought back. Jack's apartment offered several tactical advantages despite its modest size. The narrow stairwell created a natural choke point where superior numbers meant nothing. The fire escape provided an alternative exit, though using it would mean abandoning any civilians caught in the crossfire. His years of studying the building's layout during quiet maintenance work now paid dividends in survival planning. But as Jack prepared his defensive positions, movement in the alley below changed everything. Through his rear window, he spotted their patrol car's trunk standing slightly open, revealing bound hands and a piece of torn fabric that made his blood freeze. Someone was trapped inside, a victim, probably female based on the small hands desperately grasping at freedom. The fabric looked like it might be from a young woman's shirt, confirming his worst fears about what these corrupt officers had been doing with their authority. Jack's escape plan disintegrated instantly. His warrior's code wouldn't allow him to flee while an innocent person suffered at the hands of predators. The tactical situation had shifted from survival to rescue, multiplying the danger exponentially. The assault began with explosive force as the front door splintered under tactical rams, but Jack was already moving toward the fire escape. Not to flee, but to circle behind his attackers and reach the patrol car where someone's daughter waited for salvation that might never come. Jack triggered the building's fire alarm as he descended the fire escape, the piercing wail drawing neighbors from their apartments and transforming a covert operation into a public spectacle. Emergency lights bathed the alley in harsh red illumination while confused residents spilled onto the street, their presence providing both cover and witnesses that complicated the officers' plans. The diversion worked perfectly. Brennan's coordinated assault fragmented as team members struggled to maintain tactical positions while explaining their presence to increasingly suspicious civilians. Jack used the chaos to circle behind their perimeter, his dark clothing allowing him to blend with shadows the emergency lighting couldn't penetrate. Morrison stood guard beside the patrol car, his nervous energy more pronounced as the operation spiraled beyond his comfort level. The young officer kept checking his radio for updates while scanning the growing crowd of onlookers, clearly unprepared for the tactical complexity of urban combat. Jack approached from Morrison's blind spot, moving with the fluid precision that had made him legendary. The encounter lasted 3 seconds, a precise strike to a nerve cluster that rendered Morrison unconscious without permanent damage, followed by a gentle lowering of his body to prevent noise that might alert other team members that Jack's hands shook as he opened the patrol car's trunk, revealing the nightmare he had dreaded finding. Lisa Wellington lay bound and gagged, her eyes wide with terror and recognition. Dorothy's niece had been missing for 3 weeks, and now Jack understood why no investigation had yielded results. The predators wore badges. "I'm here to help," Jack whispered, carefully removing Lisa's gag while checking for injuries. She was dehydrated, traumatized, but alive. Bruises on her wrists and ankles told stories of prolonged captivity, while her clothes showed signs of abuse that made Jack's carefully controlled rage burn white-hot. That Lisa's whispered words shattered any hope of simple resolution. "There are others. A compound outside town. They buy and sell us like animals. The police, they're all part of it." The revelation transformed Jack's understanding completely. This wasn't isolated corruption, but a sophisticated trafficking network using law enforcement credentials to operate with impunity. Lisa's survival proved these monsters had been destroying innocent lives while hiding behind badges and public trust. As Jack helped Lisa from the trunk, Brennan's voice cut through the night air. "Buildings secure. Target's not inside. Spread out and find him." Jack realized they had perhaps 60 seconds before the search pattern reached their position. Lisa could barely stand after weeks of captivity, making rapid escape impossible. They needed sanctuary, medical attention, and allies who could be trusted absolutely. "Can you walk?" Jack asked, supporting Lisa's weight while scanning for threats. "I think so," she replied, her voice stronger than her physical condition suggested. "But Jack, that's really you, isn't it?" Jackie Chan. The question hung between them like a bridge between past and present. 3 years of anonymity crumbled in the face of necessity, but Jack felt no regret. Some secrets were worth preserving. Others died the moment innocent blood was spilled. "I'm just a man who couldn't walk away," Jack replied, helping Lisa toward the shadows between buildings. Behind them, Brennan's voice carried new urgency. "Patrol car's been compromised. The package is gone. All units converge on my position." The hunt had begun in earnest, but they were no longer chasing a helpless maintenance worker. Jackie Chan had returned to protect the innocent, and these corrupt officers were about to learn why some legends never truly retire. Jack positioned himself protectively in front of Lisa as Brennan and 2 backup officers emerged from the building's main entrance, their weapons drawn and faces twisted with fury. The alley behind Henderson's Hardware became an arena where 3 years of peaceful retirement would end in violence that couldn't be avoided. "Should have minded your own business, old man," Brennan snarled, his gun trained on Jack's center mass. "Now you and the girl both disappear tonight." The fight erupted when Vasquez lunged toward Lisa, his dead eyes showing anticipation of violence. Jack's response was explosive, a spinning kick that connected with Vasquez's wrist, sending his weapon clattering across asphalt, while simultaneously dodging Brennan's wild gunshot that sparked off a nearby dumpster. Jack flowed into his legendary fighting style, decades of training crystallizing into fluid motion that turned the confined alley into his advantage. A trash can lid became a shield, deflecting Morrison's panic shots while Jack closed distance with predatory grace. The broken handle of a discarded mop transformed into improvised nunchucks, their spinning arcs creating a defensive barrier that no bullet could penetrate. Vasquez struggled to his feet, drawing a backup weapon, but Jack was already inside his reach. A precise strike to the shoulder nerve cluster rendered the officer's arm useless, followed by a pressure point technique that dropped him unconscious without permanent damage. Jack's moral code demanded restraint even against those who deserved no mercy. Morrison tried to retreat while firing, but panic destroyed his accuracy. Jack used a length of chain from the dumpster area as a flexible weapon, its weighted end wrapping around Morrison's gun hand and yanking the weapon away. A nerve punch to the officer's neck sent him crumpling to the ground, alive but neutralized. Brennan found himself alone, facing a legend he had dismissed as a harmless old man. "You think you've won something?" he screamed, backing toward his patrol car. "This is bigger than you know. We have people everywhere. You can't protect everyone." Jack advanced with deadly calm, his movements carrying the authority of someone who had faced true monsters throughout his career. "Perhaps, but I can protect her." Brennan fled, diving into his patrol car and roaring away into the night. But not before Jack memorized his license plate and noted the radio frequencies crackling from his abandoned equipment. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the war had just begun. Jack helped Lisa into Morrison's abandoned patrol car, his hands gentle despite the violence they had just unleashed. "We need medical attention for you, but hospitals ask questions we can't answer safely." Lisa's voice carried surprising strength despite her ordeal. "Dorothy, take me to Aunt Dorothy. She'll help us." As Jack started the engine, he found himself driving not toward escape, but deeper into a conflict that would demand everything he had sacrificed his peaceful retirement to avoid. The GPS unit in the patrol car revealed marked locations throughout the county, drop points, safe houses, and coordinates that painted a picture of systematic evil operating under color of law. Through the radio, Stone's voice coordinated a countywide manhunt. "All units, Jackie Chan is armed and extremely dangerous. He's kidnapped a police witness and killed 2 officers." Jack realized they were now fugitives being hunted by both corrupt and honest cops who believed they were tracking a cop-killing terrorist. Jack drove through Cedar Falls back streets as Lisa fought off waves of nausea from whatever drugs the traffickers had used to keep her compliant. Her condition deteriorated rapidly, trembling, cold sweats, and moments of disorientation that indicated dangerous withdrawal symptoms requiring immediate medical intervention. "Stay with me, Lisa," Jack urged, supporting her weight as they approached Mel's Diner. The building stood dark except for a single light in the upstairs apartment where Dorothy lived above her restaurant. Jack's gentle knocking brought Dorothy to the window, and her scream of joy at seeing Lisa alive echoed through the empty street. Dorothy's apartment door flew open, revealing the waitress in a faded bathrobe, her face streaming with tears as she gathered her niece into protective arms. "Oh, baby. Oh, my sweet girl. I thought I'd lost you forever," she sobbed, her maternal instincts immediately assessing Lisa's condition with growing alarm. "She needs medical attention," Jack explained quietly. "But we can't involve hospitals. These aren't just corrupt police. They're trafficking innocent girls, and they have connections throughout the system." Frank Martinez arrived within minutes, drawn by Dorothy's cries and the commotion in the street. The Vietnam veteran took one look at the situation and immediately understood the tactical implications. "Bring her inside," he commanded, his military training automatically taking charge of the medical emergency. Frank's apartment above the diner revealed capabilities that went far beyond short-order cooking. Medical supplies, military-grade communication, equipment, and a well-stocked pharmacy showed a man who had never stopped being a soldier despite decades of civilian life. "Combat medic, 2 tours," Frank explained tersely as he examined Lisa's condition. "Seen withdrawal from military stimulants and worse. She's been drugged with something designed to create dependency quickly." Lisa's fever spiked dangerously. As Frank worked to stabilize her condition, his weathered hands moving with the precision of someone who had saved lives under fire. Jack and Dorothy stood guard, watching both Lisa's struggle and the street below for signs of pursuit. The compound, Lisa whispered through chattering teeth. 20 miles north, looks like a ranch. At least 15 girls there, maybe more. They're planning something big, a shipment tomorrow night. The intelligence hit Jack like a physical blow. Tomorrow night meant dozens of innocent victims would disappear forever into trafficking networks that span the globe. Time was running out for girls whose families would never know their fate. Frank's radio crackled with intercepted police communications, revealing the scope of their new reality. All units, be advised. Jackie Chan is armed and extremely dangerous. He's kidnapped a police witness and killed 2 officers. Use extreme caution. They're painting you as a cop killer, Frank observed grimly. Every honest officer in 3 counties is hunting you now, believing they're tracking a terrorist. Dorothy's face hardened with determination that surprised even Jack. Then we give them the truth. These monsters took my baby girl, and God knows how many others. I don't care what badges they wear, they're going to pay. The unlikely alliance formed naturally around Lisa's bedside. Jack with his legendary combat skills, Frank with tactical knowledge and military connections, Dorothy with community ties and fierce protective instincts. They were vastly outgunned but united by purpose that transcended personal safety. As dawn approached, Jack realized their mission had evolved beyond simple rescue. They were now at war with a criminal empire that used legitimate authority as cover for unspeakable crimes. Tomorrow night's shipment represented the point of no return. Succeed, and dozens of girls might live. Fail, and they would vanish forever into global trafficking networks. Frank's voice cut through the tension. My FBI contact confirms federal interest, but they need evidence to move against a police chief. We're not just fighting for Lisa anymore, we're fighting for justice. The team huddled in Mel's Diner's kitchen as false reports about Jack being a cop killer spread across law enforcement channels throughout Montana. Every police radio in 3 counties carried the same message: Jackie Chan had murdered officers and kidnapped a witness, making him the most wanted fugitive in the state. Frank's military contacts provided their first ray of hope. Agent Rebecca Stone at the FBI confirmed that federal investigators had been tracking unusual police activity in the region for months, but lacked concrete evidence to move against law enforcement officials. Frank's old Army buddy spoke in careful code, but the message was clear. They were the key to breaking a case that had stymied federal authorities. Tell me about the compound, Jack said, studying Lisa as her condition stabilized under Frank's expert care. Despite her trauma, Lisa's memory was sharp, providing tactical intelligence that no federal investigation could have obtained. Stone calls it his ranch, Lisa replied, her voice growing stronger with each hour of freedom. 20 miles north on Highway 287, then 8 miles east on a dirt road. Looks like a legitimate cattle operation from the main road, but the basement has been converted into holding cells. Dorothy revealed depths of community knowledge that surprised even Jack. As a lifelong Cedar Falls resident, she knew every family, every missing person report, every tragedy that the police had failed to investigate properly. Her discreet phone calls throughout the morning painted a horrifying picture. 6 girls in the past year, Dorothy reported, her voice thick with controlled rage. All from working-class families, all cases that went nowhere despite family pressure. Sarah Mitchell, age 16. Jenny Rodriguez, 18. Maria Santos, 19. The police claimed they were runaways, but their families knew better. Jack processed the intelligence with tactical precision, his mind cataloging patrol schedules, guard rotations, and structural weaknesses that Lisa described. But one detail made his blood run cold. The timeline was accelerating faster than anticipated. Tomorrow night's auction isn't just a sale, Lisa explained, her voice dropping to a whisper. It's the grand finale. Stone is retiring, moving his operation overseas. All the girls currently held will be sold and shipped out permanently. After tomorrow, there won't be evidence left to find. Frank's equipment allowed them to monitor law enforcement communications, revealing the true scope of the manhunt targeting Jack. State troopers, federal marshals, and honest local officers were converging on Cedar Falls, all believing they were hunting a dangerous terrorist who had murdered their brothers in blue. We're fighting on 2 fronts now, Frank observed grimly. Stone's corruption, and the legitimate law enforcement officers who think we're the enemy. Jack found himself studying maps of the region, his entertainment industry experience helping him visualize tactical approaches to seemingly impossible scenarios. Years of choreographing complex action sequences had taught him to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles. That Dorothy's community connections proved invaluable as she reached out to families of missing girls, building a network of desperate parents who had been dismissed by corrupt authorities. Each phone call revealed another piece of the trafficking network's scope. Mrs. Rodriguez hasn't heard from Jenny in 4 months, Dorothy reported. The police told her Jenny was probably in Las Vegas, but Jenny was terrified of traveling alone. She would never have left without telling her mother. Lisa's revelation hit them like a thunderbolt. There's a second compound. Stone calls it his premium facility, where he keeps girls from wealthy families whose disappearances generated too much attention for regular operations. Jack realized they weren't just fighting a trafficking ring, but a sophisticated criminal empire that had corrupted law enforcement at multiple levels. The scope of the operation suggested connections reaching far beyond rural Montana. As they planned their desperate assault, radio traffic revealed Stone's voice coordinating the manhunt. Jack's blood chilled as he recognized the voice from 15 years ago, Police Chief Walter Stone, the man who had tried to recruit Jackie Chan for private security work and had sworn revenge when refused. This wasn't random corruption. It was personal. Jack stared at Frank's communication equipment as Police Chief Walter Stone's voice continued coordinating the manhunt, memories flooding back with crystalline clarity. 15 years ago, Stone had approached Jackie Chan with an offer to provide security consultation for wealthy clients. Work that Jack quickly realized was a front for kidnapping, extortion, and worse. The flashback hit with visceral force. Stone's expensive suit and predatory smile in that Beverly Hills hotel room, his casual mention of clients who paid premium prices for exclusive experiences with young women. Jack's immediate refusal and threat to expose Stone if he ever made contact again had triggered a cold fury in the man's eyes. "You'll regret this, Chan," Stone had promised. "Someday, when you least expect it, I'll make you pay for your self-righteous attitude." Now, in Cedar Falls, Stone had found his opportunity for revenge. Jack's presence in his territory hadn't been random. Stone had been watching, learning Jack's routines, identifying his connections. Dorothy and Lisa hadn't been randomly selected victims, but carefully chosen leverage against the man who had humiliated him years earlier. He's been planning this for months, Jack realized aloud, the tactical picture becoming terrifyingly clear. Lisa wasn't taken by chance. Stone knew about my relationship with Dorothy, used her niece as bait to draw me into his operation. Frank processed this revelation with military efficiency. Personal vendetta changes everything. He won't just eliminate you quietly. He'll want to destroy you publicly first. That psychological need for revenge becomes his weakness. Dorothy broke down as the implications hit her. "Lisa was taken because of me? Because I befriended you." The guilt in her voice was devastating, but Jack moved quickly to redirect her. "Focus. Stone is responsible for his own crimes," Jack said firmly. "Your kindness isn't what endangered Lisa. His evil is what destroyed her innocence." Lisa, despite her ordeal, showed remarkable strength by comforting her aunt. "Aunt Dorothy, you gave me the courage to survive by showing me what real love looks like. Don't let his evil poison that." Frank's monitoring equipment revealed new intelligence about the trafficking operation's scope. Stone's communications showed coordination with smuggling networks in Portland, Vancouver, and Los Angeles. The operation generated millions annually, with tomorrow night's final shipment representing his retirement fund. 2-year operation, Frank summarized grimly. Stone's been building toward this moment. One massive score before disappearing with accumulated wealth. He's not just trafficking girls. He's planning to vanish permanently after tomorrow. The team realized their mission had expanded beyond rescue to preventing Stone's escape with evidence that could destroy dozens of families across multiple states. If he reached international waters with his victims and documentation, justice would become impossible. Dorothy's strength emerged through her tears as she began coordinating with other families whose daughters had vanished. Her calls revealed a network of desperate parents who had been ignored, dismissed, or threatened by corrupt authorities. The Rodriguez family has been keeping their own investigation records, Dorothy reported. Photos, timelines, evidence police refuse to collect. They're willing to help if it means finding their Jenny. Jack found himself studying tactical approaches to an impossible mission, infiltrating a fortified compound, gathering evidence of federal crimes, and rescuing dozens of victims before a midnight deadline. Traditional assault methods would result in hostage deaths and evidence destruction. We need federal support, Frank declared. But we also need to move faster than bureaucracy allows. Lisa provided the final piece of intelligence that changed their tactical planning. Stone keeps records of everything: names, dates, payments, client information. He calls it his insurance policy, stored in a safe at the main compound. Get those files, and you can destroy his entire network. As they finalized their desperate plan, emergency broadcasts revealed Stone accelerating his timeline. The shipment was moving tonight at 11 p.m., not tomorrow. They had 6 hours to accomplish what seemed impossible. Jack looked at his unlikely team: a Vietnam veteran, a diner waitress, and a teenage trafficking survivor, and realized they represented everything Stone had tried to destroy: honor, community, and the courage to protect innocence. 6 hours, Jack said quietly. Time to remind the world why some legends never truly retire. The compressed timeline hit the team like a physical blow as they processed having 6 hours instead of 24 to infiltrate a fortified compound, gather federal evidence, and rescue dozens of trafficking victims. Frank immediately began redistributing equipment while Jack recalculated tactical approaches for an operation that had just transformed from difficult to miraculous. Jack made the hardest decision of his career, splitting their minimal resources to cover maximum ground. I'll infiltrate the main compound alone to gather evidence and create chaos. Frank, coordinate with local authorities to secure the secondary facility. Dorothy, work with Agent Reynolds to establish federal backup. The decision violated every tactical principle Frank had learned in special forces, but their situation demanded impossible choices. Splitting forces against superior numbers is suicide, Frank protested. Leaving victims to die while we plan perfect operations is worse. Jack replied with finality that ended discussion that Jack's transformation was complete as he changed from maintenance worker clothes into dark tactical gear Frank provided. Years of peaceful retirement fell away like discarded skin, revealing the warrior beneath. His movements became predatory, his awareness expanding to encompass threats, opportunities, and escape routes simultaneously. Lisa insisted on coordinating victim evacuation despite her own trauma, her inside knowledge of the compound's layout proving irreplaceable. The girls are kept in basement cells, but some are held in an upper floor room Stone calls his showroom. Those are the ones he plans to auction personally. Frank's military connections prove their value as Agent Reynolds arranged for tactical support that couldn't officially exist. Training accident, explosives, and communication equipment appeared through channels that maintained plausible deniability for federal authorities. Dorothy's emotional farewells revealed the depth of bonds formed through shared crisis. She pressed her St. Christopher medal into Jack's hands, the same one that had protected her late husband through Vietnam. Bring them all home, Jack. Every last one of those babies. Frank gave Jack his father's military compass, carried through 3 wars, and never failed to point toward home. The gesture carried weight that needed no words. Warriors recognizing each other across generations and conflicts. As sunset approached, each team member faced the real possibility of death. The odds were overwhelming. The enemy was ruthless. And failure meant not just their own destruction, but the permanent disappearance of innocent victims into global trafficking networks. Jack's radio crackled with final intelligence as Frank confirmed federal backup was 20 minutes away, too late for the initial assault, but potentially available for extraction. Lisa's voice provided last-minute updates about guard schedules and security measures. 6 guards minimum, automatic weapons, and Stone himself will be there to oversee the final shipment, Lisa reported. He never trusts anyone else with the valuable merchandise. Jack reached the perimeter of Stone's compound as darkness fell, the fortified ranch house appearing deceptively peaceful in the Montana twilight. Through binoculars, he could see vehicles being loaded in preparation for transport. The shipment was already beginning ahead of schedule, his radio crackled with Frank's voice. Multiple hostiles at secondary location were pinned down and taking fire. The mission was fragmenting before it truly began. Jack faced the impossible choice every warrior dreaded: save his team or complete the mission. He couldn't do both. Through his scope, Jack watched teenage girls being loaded into transport vehicles like cargo, their terror visible even at distance. In the compound's windows, more faces pressed against glass, victims who would disappear forever if he failed. Jack keyed his radio one final time. "Frank, get Dorothy to safety. I'm going in." The legendary martial artist who had spent 3 years hiding from his past stepped out of the shadows and into his final battle. Jack moved through the gathering darkness toward Stone's compound, every sense heightened to combat awareness as he processed the tactical nightmare ahead. The fortified ranch sprawled across several acres, with guard towers, motion sensors, and armed patrols creating overlapping fields of fire that would challenge even military assault teams. Through his night vision scope, Jack counted at least 12 armed guards plus Stone himself, who moved between buildings with the confidence of someone who had never faced real opposition. Transport vehicles lined up in the compound's central courtyard, their engines running as drivers prepared for the midnight departure that would scatter victims across international trafficking networks. Jack's approach required every skill learned through decades of action choreography and real combat. He bypassed electronic security by following natural deer paths that avoided motion sensors, scaled perimeter walls using architectural features most people wouldn't notice, and neutralized 2 roving guards with pressure point techniques that rendered them unconscious without triggering alarms. The main building's basement entrance provided access through a ventilation grate Jack had identified during his reconnaissance. Years of maintenance work served him well as he navigated the building's mechanical systems, moving through spaces designed for equipment rather than human traffic. Inside the basement, Jack discovered the full scope of Stone's operation. Dozens of cells lined reinforced concrete walls, sophisticated security cameras monitored every angle, and medical equipment suggested systematic abuse designed to break victims' spirits. This wasn't just trafficking. It was a torture facility engineered to destroy human dignity. Jack began systematically freeing victims, starting with those too injured or drugged to move effectively. Many girls were barely conscious from chemical restraints, requiring careful assessment to determine who could assist in evacuation and who needed immediate medical attention. "Are you really Jackie Chan?" whispered Maria Santos, a 19-year-old who had been missing for 6 months. Her English was heavily accented, but her eyes showed intelligence that had survived her ordeal. "I'm just someone who couldn't walk away," Jack replied, helping her to her feet while checking for injuries that might impede movement. As Jack worked to organize the rescue, steel doors suddenly slammed shut throughout the facility. Emergency lighting bathed everything in hellish red as Stone's voice echoed through speakers positioned around the basement. "Welcome home, Jackie Chan. I've been waiting 15 years for this family reunion." Jack realized he had walked directly into a trap Stone had spent months preparing. The martial arts legend who had once refused to be corrupted had finally been lured into an inescapable situation where his greatest strength, protecting innocence, became his fatal weakness. Stone appeared on monitors throughout the basement, his face showing years of hatred finally approaching satisfaction. "You cost me millions when you refused my generous offer, Jackie. Now you'll watch these girls die before I kill you slowly." The basement became a prison as electronic locks engaged and armed guards took positions outside. Jack stood surrounded by the victims he had come to save, realizing that his rescue attempt had instead doomed them all to witness his failure before their own deaths. Through the monitors, Stone revealed the depth of his obsession with destroying Jackie Chan. The trafficking operation, while profitable, had also served as elaborate bait to draw Jack into a situation where escape was impossible, and mercy would be weaponized against him. "Every girl you see represents your failure," Stone continued. "Each one will die knowing that the great Jackie Chan couldn't save them when it mattered most." Jack looked around the basement at 43 faces depending on him for salvation, their trust both burden and motivation. Stone's trap was perfect, but Jack had survived impossible situations before by finding opportunities others couldn't see. His maintenance worker experience suddenly became his greatest tactical advantage as he spotted something Stone's architects had overlooked: a utility access panel hidden behind years of grime and neglect. Jack studied the utility panel while maintaining his facade of defeat for Stone's surveillance cameras. His years of building maintenance revealed what Stone's security experts had missed. The panel accessed the compound's original steam heating system, which connected to structural support beams throughout the facility and provided potential access to areas beyond the basement prison. Working under the pretense of comforting victims, Jack began organizing them into escape groups using whispered instructions and hand signals developed during decades of coordinating complex movie stunts. His entertainment industry experience proved invaluable for managing large groups under extreme pressure while maintaining the illusion of compliance. "Listen carefully," Jack whispered to Maria, who had emerged as a natural leader among the captives. "When the lights go out, everyone moves exactly as we practiced. No noise, no panic. Follow the girl in front of you." Stone's psychological warfare continued through the monitor system as he revealed the scope of his criminal empire. The trafficking network spanned 5 states, generated millions in annual revenue, and maintained corruption at every level of law enforcement. Jack's recording device captured every word, providing the evidence Agent Reynolds needed for federal prosecution. Jack's radio crackled with Frank's voice reporting success at the secondary compound. 12 additional victims secured. Dorothy coordinating medical response. Federal backup en route, but still 15 minutes out. The news provided hope tempered by reality. 15 minutes might as well be 15 hours given their current situation. Jack had to create his own opportunities rather than wait for rescue that would arrive too late. Stone's impatience with Jack's apparent resignation led to escalation. "I'm tired of waiting for you to beg, Jackie. Maybe watching these girls suffer will motivate your famous compassion." When guards entered the basement to select the first execution victim, Jack gave his prearranged signal, touching his jade pendant. The gesture every victim had been taught meant immediate action regardless of personal cost. Jack's movement toward the utility panel triggered the building's electrical cascade failure he had carefully planned. Emergency lighting kicked in as main power died, but Jack had already memorized every shadow and obstacle during his reconnaissance. The basement transformed into controlled chaos as Jack's sabotage spread throughout the compound. Victims moved with practiced precision toward designated exits, while Jack engaged multiple guards in the confined space. His martial arts style adapted perfectly to the environment, using pipes as weapons, electrical panels as shields, and the victims' movements as tactical cover. "Move now," Jack commanded as he created a breakthrough in the basement's outer wall, using structural weaknesses his maintenance expertise had identified. The girls poured through the breach toward freedom while Jack held the choke point against overwhelming odds. That Stone's rage echoed through failing speakers. "Kill them all. Burn the building down. I want no witnesses." Jack realized Stone preferred destroying evidence to allowing testimony that could expose his network. The compound structure, already weakened by Jack's systematic sabotage, began showing stress fractures as Stone's men set fires throughout the facility. Through smoke and collapsing debris, Jack counted victims as they escaped: 37. Girls reaching safety while 6 remained trapped in upper floors that were now inaccessible due to structural damage and spreading fires. Jack faced his greatest moral test: escape with the majority he had saved, or risk everything to reach the final victims as the building became a death trap around them. Lisa's voice crackled through his radio. "Uncle Jack, there's a group trapped on the 2nd floor. I'm going back for them." "Negative," Jack replied immediately. "You've done enough. Get to safety." But Lisa was already moving, her courage inspired by Jack's example of never abandoning those in need. Jack watched in horror as Lisa disappeared back into the burning compound, her determination to save the remaining victims overriding every survival instinct. The building shuddered around them as Stone's accelerants fed fires that were rapidly transforming the structure into a crematorium designed to eliminate all evidence of his crimes. "Lisa, report your position," Jack commanded through his radio while fighting his way toward the main staircase. The tactical situation had evolved from rescue to survival as sections of the building began collapsing under the combined stress of structural sabotage and deliberate arson, Stone appeared through the smoke accompanied by 3 professional killers. Their military-grade weapons and tactical coordination revealing the true scope of resources behind his criminal empire. The police chief had shed any pretense of legitimacy, embracing his role as international criminal without concern for maintaining cover. "You took everything from me 15 years ago," Stone screamed over the sound of collapsing beams and roaring flames. "My reputation, my connections, my future. Now I take everything from you, starting with that girl who thinks you're worth saving." The building's main hall became an arena of fire and falling debris as Jack faced the most important battle of his career. His opponents were professionals, but they were fighting for money while he fought for innocent lives. The difference in motivation proved decisive as Jack's legendary skills adapted to environmental hazards that negated many conventional tactical advantages. Jack used the collapsing structure as both weapon and shield, causing targeted cave-ins that eliminated Stone's numerical advantage while creating paths toward the upper floors where victims remained trapped. His decades of stunt work experience helped him navigate hazards that would have killed ordinary fighters. Lisa's voice crackled through failing communications. "Second floor secure. 6 girls accounted for. But the staircase is gone. We need another way out." Jack's mind raced through architectural possibilities as the building continued its death throes around them. The original construction included a service elevator that might still function, but reaching it required crossing the main hall where Stone waited with his remaining killers. "Stone," Jack called out, his voice carrying across the chaos. "This is between us. Let the girls go and finish what you started 15 years ago." Stone's response revealed the depth of his madness. "They stay to watch you die. Every girl you failed to save becomes part of your legend. The great Jackie Chan who couldn't protect innocent children." The final confrontation began as ceiling sections collapsed around them, creating a hellscape where every step carried the risk of death from fire or falling debris. Jack's opponents had superior firepower, but his environmental awareness and moral purpose provided advantages they couldn't match. Through the smoke, Jack spotted transport vehicles beginning to leave the compound, Stone's network evacuating with whatever evidence and victims they could salvage. If those vehicles escaped, the trafficking operation would simply relocate and continue destroying lives elsewhere. Jack realized he faced an impossible choice: pursue Stone and prevent the network's escape, or rescue Lisa and the final victims from the burning building. He couldn't accomplish both objectives simultaneously. Stone's taunting voice carried his final psychological weapon. "Choose, Jackie. Save the girl who admires you, or stop the criminals who will destroy hundreds more. Your famous heroism can't do both." As the building's main support beam began its final collapse, Jack made his choice. Lisa had shown him that heroism wasn't about being perfect. It was about never giving up on those who needed protection. "Frank, Stone's convoy is escaping north on Highway 287. Federal units need to intercept immediately." Jack abandoned his pursuit of Stone to dive toward the service elevator, praying it would hold long enough to reach Lisa and the final victims before the building completed its transformation into a funeral pyre. The elevator rose through smoke and flame toward the second floor, where 6 girls and 1 brave young woman waited for salvation that might never come. The service elevator groaned through smoke and flame as Jack rose toward the second floor, its ancient cables protesting against structural damage that threatened to send the car plummeting back into the inferno below. Through the failing shaft, he could hear Lisa's voice calling to the trapped victims, her courage providing anchor points of hope in a building transformed into hell. Jack emerged into a nightmare of smoke and collapsing ceiling tiles, the second floor rapidly becoming uninhabitable as fires consumed the building's support structures. Lisa stood in the hallway with 6 terrified girls, ranging in age from 15 to 20, their faces showing the trauma of prolonged captivity mixed with desperate hope for rescue. "The main staircase collapsed 10 minutes ago," Lisa reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I've checked every exit. We're completely cut off except for this elevator." Jack assessed their situation with tactical precision while comforting the victims with his presence. The elevator represented their only escape route, but its capacity was limited and the shaft showed increasing signs of structural failure. Moving 9 people in multiple trips would require time they didn't have. Everyone stays together, Jack decided, his voice carrying the authority that had once commanded movie sets under dangerous conditions. We make one trip or none at all. The girls pressed together in the failing elevator car, their trust in Jack absolute despite having just met him. Years of captivity had taught them to recognize genuine protectors, and something in Jack's bearing promised safety even in the face of impossible odds. The elevator descended through billowing smoke. Stone's voice echoed through the building's failing PA system. You can't save them all, Jackie. Even if you reach the ground floor, my men control every exit. Surrender now, and I'll make their deaths quick. Jack's response carried across the building with quiet finality. The only person dying tonight is the man who hurt these children. The elevator shuddered to a halt 15 feet above the basement floor as cables snapped under heat stress. Through the smoke, Jack could see Stone's remaining killers positioned to cover the building's exits, their automatic weapons trained on potential escape routes. Can everyone climb down? Jack asked, assessing each girl's physical condition. Most were weak from captivity and drugs, but fear had awakened reserves of strength they didn't know they possessed. Lisa went first, her movements sure despite her recent ordeal. One by one, the victims followed her example, lowering themselves. Through the elevator's escape hatch into Jack's waiting arms. Each successful descent brought them closer to freedom while the building continued its death spiral around them. The last girl, barely 16 and terrified of heights, froze halfway down the cable. I can't, she whispered, her voice lost in the roar of approaching flames. Jack climbed up to her position, his voice gentle despite the urgency of their situation. What's your name? Amanda, she replied, tears streaming down her smoke-stained face. Amanda, my daughter would be about your age now. She was afraid of heights too, but she learned that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you're terrified. Amanda found her strength in Jack's words, completing her descent as the elevator car finally broke free and crashed into the basement below, eliminating their escape route forever. Jack led the group through the basement's maze of debris and smoke, his memorized layout of the building providing navigation through chaos that would have trapped anyone else. The victims stayed close behind him, their trust absolute as he guided them toward the breach he had created earlier in the concrete wall. Behind them, Stone's voice carried murderous rage as he realized his perfect trap was collapsing along with his burning building. Find them. They can't have gone far in this smoke. Kill the old man and bring me the girls. I still have buyers waiting. The basement had transformed into a furnace as fires from above consumed support beams and sent flaming debris cascading through collapsed floor sections. Jack's maintenance expertise helped him identify which structural elements would hold and which were moments from catastrophic failure. Stay low, follow my exact footsteps, and don't look back, Jack instructed, as they approached the wall breach. Through the opening, fresh Montana air beckoned like salvation, but the approach required crossing an area where burning ceiling sections created a deadly obstacle course. Lisa took charge of organizing the victims while Jack cleared their path, his movements precise despite the hellish conditions. Each girl passed through the breach safely, emerging into the compound's courtyard where federal vehicles were finally arriving with sirens wailing and tactical teams deploying. Agent Reynolds appeared through the smoke, her professional composure cracking as she saw the rescued victims emerging from what had become a crematorium. Medical teams are en route, she reported. How many more inside? Just us, Jack replied, helping Amanda through the breach as the building's main support structure began its final collapse. But Stone escaped with at least a dozen men and transport vehicles. The network is still operational. The building's death throes created a thunderous roar as decades of construction succumbed to structural failure and deliberate arson. Jack pulled Lisa through the breach just as the basement ceiling collapsed where they had been standing seconds earlier. Outside, the rescued victims received immediate medical attention while providing crucial testimony about Stone's operation. Their accounts painted a horrifying picture of systematic abuse spanning multiple states, with corruption reaching federal levels that would require extensive investigation to fully expose. Stone's convoy is heading toward the Canadian border. Agent Reynolds reported through her radio. We have units in pursuit. but he's got a significant head start and detailed knowledge of back roads. Jack realized their rescue mission had succeeded beyond all reasonable expectations. 49 victims saved from certain death or worse. But Stone's escape meant the criminal network would simply relocate and continue its operations, destroying more innocent lives while evading justice. Lisa approached Jack as paramedics checked her vital signs, her voice carrying determination that surprised everyone within hearing range. He's not going to stop, is he? Even after all this, he'll just start over somewhere else. Perhaps, Jack admitted, watching Stone's compound burn in the distance. But today, 49 girls go home to their families instead of disappearing forever. Sometimes that's enough. Agent Reynolds interrupted their conversation with news that changed everything. Stone's convoy was intercepted at the border. Local authorities have him in custody along with evidence that will dismantle his entire network. Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he was carrying. 3 years of peaceful retirement had ended in violence. But the outcome justified every risk they had taken that as dawn broke over the smoldering ruins of Stone's compound. Jack stood surrounded by the victims he had saved and the community that had supported him. The legend of Jackie Chan had been reborn not through movie stunts or martial arts demonstrations, but through the simple act of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Dorothy arrived with Frank, both of them bearing food and medical supplies for the rescued victims. Their faces showed the exhaustion of people who had fought beyond their limits, but their eyes carried satisfaction that only comes from achieving justice against impossible odds. Jack stood amid the controlled chaos of the rescue site as federal agents documented evidence and medical teams treated victims who were finally free after months of captivity. The dawn light revealed the full scope of what they had accomplished. 49 girls rescued, a criminal network dismantled, and corruption exposed at multiple levels of law enforcement. Agent Reynolds approached with preliminary reports that painted an even larger picture than they had imagined. Stone's records show operations in 12 states, connections to international trafficking networks, and client lists that include prominent politicians and business leaders. This investigation will take years to complete fully. Lisa emerged from the medical treatment area with surprising strength, her resilience inspiring everyone who witnessed her transformation from victim to survivor to advocate. The other girls are asking about counseling services and legal support. They want to testify against Stone and his network. Jack watched as families began arriving to reclaim daughters they had feared lost forever. The reunions were emotional. Beyond description, parents who had never stopped hoping embraced children who had survived unimaginable horrors through courage and mutual support. Dorothy coordinated with social services to ensure each rescued victim received appropriate care, her maternal instincts extending to embrace 49 girls who needed temporary family while healing from their trauma. They're all staying in Cedar Falls until they're ready to go home, she announced. This community will take care of them. Frank worked with federal authorities to establish security for the victims and their families, his military expertise, ensuring that any remaining criminal associates couldn't threaten those who had agreed to testify. Stone's network had tentacles everywhere, he reported. We need to assume there are still people out there who want these girls silenced. Jack found himself reflecting on the unexpected turn his retirement had taken. 3 years of anonymity had been shattered, but the result was 49 lives saved and justice served against those who had preyed on the innocent. His decision to hide from fame seemed less important than his choice to emerge when protection was needed. What happens now? Lisa asked, joining Jack as he surveyed the rescue operation. Do you go back to being just Jack Chun, maintenance worker? The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Jack's true identity was now known throughout law enforcement circles, making continued anonymity impossible. But fame had never been what he sought. Purpose was what mattered. I think Jack Chun, maintenance worker, has found a new job description, Jack replied with a slight smile. Perhaps teaching young people how to protect themselves and others. Agent Reynolds confirmed that Stone faced federal charges carrying multiple life sentences, with evidence so overwhelming that conviction was virtually guaranteed. His criminal empire was collapsing as associates were arrested and assets frozen throughout the investigation as the morning progressed. Jack watched Lisa take charge of organizing the rescued victims into support groups, her natural leadership abilities channeling trauma into constructive action. Her transformation from captive to advocate represented hope for all the girls who had survived Stone's trafficking network. Dorothy approached with news that would reshape their community permanently. The mayor wants to establish a crisis center for trafficking victims, with federal funding to provide counseling, legal support, and job training. They're asking if you'd consider heading the self-defense training program. Frank added his own perspective. Local law enforcement wants you to consult on human trafficking awareness training. After what happened here, they realized how unprepared they were to recognize the signs. Jack looked around at the community that had embraced him as Jack Chun and was now ready to support him as Jackie Chan. The transition from hiding his identity to using it purposefully felt natural rather than forced. Cedar Falls has been my home for 3 years, Jack said finally. If they'll have me, I'd like to stay and help build something good from what Stone tried to destroy. The rescued victims gathered around Jack as word spread of his decision, their faces showing the hope that comes from knowing someone will continue fighting for their protection. 6 months later, Jack stood in the renovated community center that had become the Cedar Falls Crisis Response Training Facility, watching Lisa demonstrate basic self-defense techniques to a group of teenage girls whose confidence had been rebuilt through courage and community support. The transformation in both the facility and its participants represented everything Jack had hoped to accomplish through his decision to remain in Cedar Falls. The training facility occupied the same basement where Jack had first discovered evidence of Stone's trafficking operation, but the space had been completely renovated into a bright, welcoming environment where survivors could learn to protect themselves and others. Federal funding had provided state-of-the-art equipment, counseling services, and educational resources that served as a model for similar programs nationwide. Lisa had evolved into a remarkable advocate whose speaking engagements reached audiences across the country, sharing her story of survival and the importance of community response to human trafficking. Her decision to remain in Cedar Falls and pursue social work education had inspired other survivors to find their own paths toward healing and purpose. Remember, Lisa instructed her students, self-defense isn't about being the strongest person in the room. It's about being aware of your surroundings and trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. Jack nodded approvingly from the sidelines, his role now focused on teaching advanced techniques to local law enforcement and training instructors who would carry these skills to other communities. His expertise in martial arts had been enhanced by his understanding of human trafficking methods, creating a comprehensive approach to personal safety education. Dorothy had transformed her grief over Lisa's ordeal into advocacy for missing persons families, establishing a support network that helped other parents navigate law enforcement bureaucracy and media attention. Her work had already resulted in 3 successful recoveries of kidnapped children in neighboring states. Frank's military connections had proven invaluable in establishing regional training programs for emergency responders, combining tactical expertise with trauma-informed care that addressed both immediate rescue needs and long-term recovery support. His basement command center had evolved into a legitimate coordination facility for multi-agency operations. Agent Reynolds stopped by regularly to provide updates on the ongoing investigation into Stone's network, which had led to arrests in 15 states and the rescue of over 200 additional victims. Stone himself remained in federal custody, his conviction on multiple trafficking charges resulting in a life sentence without possibility of parole. The ripple effects of what you accomplished here continue expanding, Reynolds reported during her latest visit. Training programs based on your model are being implemented in major cities across the country. You've changed how law enforcement approaches human trafficking cases. Jack found deep satisfaction in the work, but his greatest joy came from watching the survivors rebuild their lives with strength and purpose. Amanda, the girl who had been afraid of heights, now worked as a peer counselor helping newly rescued victims navigate their first weeks of freedom. Maria Santos had become fluent in English and was pursuing nursing education with plans to work in trauma care. Her journey from victim to healer represented the kind of transformation that gave meaning to everything they had endured during that terrible night 6 months earlier. The facility's success had attracted national attention, with documentary crews, and journalists documenting the Cedar Falls model of community-based response to human trafficking. Jack participated reluctantly in these productions, preferring to highlight the survivors' courage rather than his own role in their rescue. "This isn't about Jackie Chan being a hero," he explained to one persistent reporter. "This is about ordinary people choosing to protect their neighbors when evil threatens their community." As evening approached, Jack concluded the day's training session with his customary reminder: "True strength protects the innocent. Today, we learned to be strong." The students bowed respectfully before dispersing to their families, their confidence visible in improved posture and alert awareness that would serve them well throughout their lives. Jack remained behind to secure the facility, a routine that had become meditation on how much his life had changed since that Tuesday morning in Mel's diner. Through the windows, Cedar Falls bustled with normal small-town life, but Jack knew that beneath the surface, a network of trained citizens stood ready to recognize and respond to threats against the vulnerable. Stone's legacy of corruption had been replaced by a community commitment to protection and justice that Jack's phone buzzed. With a text from Dorothy: "Family dinner at 6 p.m. Lisa's cooking tonight. Her famous stir-fry that she learned from watching you." Smiling, Jack locked the facility and headed home to the family he had found in the most unlikely circumstances, knowing that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to serve the community that had given his retirement years meaning and purpose. He had never expected to find point 1 year after the rescue. Jack stood before the Cedar Falls Community Center's memorial wall, studying the photographs of trafficking victims from across the region whose stories had emerged during the federal investigation. 49 faces smiled back at him, survivors whose courage had helped expose a criminal network that spanned the continent. The anniversary brought mixed emotions as Jack reflected on how completely his life had transformed. The humble maintenance worker who had once hidden from fame now found purpose in using his legend to protect others. His morning routine still began at 6:15 a.m., but instead of solitary breakfast at Mel's diner, he now coordinated with a team of advocates, counselors, and law enforcement professionals. Lisa entered the memorial room carrying files from her new position as Director of Survivor Services, her transformation from victim to leader inspiring everyone who worked with the program. "The Washington delegation arrives this afternoon," she reported. "3 senators and the Attorney General want to see our training protocols firsthand." Jack nodded while continuing to study the memorial photos, each face representing a family reunited and a future restored. The federal attention was gratifying, but he preferred the quieter victories: Amanda completing her GED, Maria starting nursing school, Jenny Rodriguez opening her own counseling practice. "Any word from Agent Reynolds on the West Coast operations?" Jack asked, knowing that Stone's network had tentacles reaching far beyond Montana. 17 more arrests last week," Lisa replied with satisfaction. "Stone's cooperation is helping. Federal agents roll up trafficking cells he operated for over a decade. They estimate we've prevented over 500 kidnappings by dismantling his recruitment methods." Dorothy appeared in the doorway with her usual impeccable timing, bearing coffee and the morning's correspondence from families whose daughters had been saved. 3 more thank you letters," she announced, her voice still catching with emotion after reading testimonials from grateful parents. Frank joined them from the Tactical Training Center, where he had been conducting his weekly session with regional SWAT teams. "Border Patrol wants to expand our trafficking recognition training to all southern checkpoints," he reported. "They're seeing patterns we identified being replicated by other criminal organizations." Jack felt deep satisfaction in the program's expanding influence, but his attention remained focused on the individuals whose lives had been directly impacted. Each rescued victim represented not just a tactical success, but a moral victory that validated every risk they had taken during that desperate night. "The survivors' support group meets tonight," Lisa mentioned, checking her schedule. "Would you like to join us?" Maria wanted to share news about her nursing program acceptance. Jack smiled at the invitation, remembering the terrified girls he had led through smoke and flames 12 months earlier. Their transformation into confident advocates and professionals proved that human resilience could overcome even the worst trauma when supported by genuine community care. "Of course," Jack replied. "These victories belong to them, not to us." As The memorial room filled with afternoon sunlight. Jack silently renewed his commitment to the work that had given his retirement years meaning beyond anything fame had ever provided. Stone's attempt to destroy innocence had instead created a community dedicated to protecting it. The legend of Jackie Chan had found its true purpose at last. The survivors' support group met in the community center's comfortable main room, where soft lighting and arranged seating created an atmosphere of safety and healing. Jack arrived early to help arrange chairs, a routine that had become precious to him over the past year of watching traumatized young women rebuild their lives through mutual support and shared strength. Maria Santos entered first, her nursing school acceptance letter clutched proudly in hands that no longer trembled when meeting strangers. The transformation from the terrified girl Jack had found in Stone's basement to the confident woman pursuing her dreams represented everything they had fought to achieve. "I wanted to thank you all," Maria began as other survivors gathered in their familiar circle, "not just for saving my life, but for showing me that surviving isn't enough. I could choose to thrive." Amanda followed with news of her own academic achievements, her fear of heights long conquered through rock climbing therapy that had helped her overcome trauma through physical challenge. "I'm applying to criminal justice programs," she announced. "I want to work with trafficking task forces." Jack listened with deep satisfaction as each woman shared progress reports that painted pictures of healing, education, and purpose. Jenny Rodriguez had opened her counseling practice and was already helping other survivors navigate the complex process of rebuilding their identities after captivity. Lisa moderated the discussion with skills that had emerged naturally through her leadership role in the recovery program. "Remember, we're not defined by what happened to us," she reminded the group. "We're defined by how we choose to respond to it." The conversation turned to a sensitive topic that had been building for months. Several survivors wanted to share their stories publicly through a documentary that would educate people about trafficking warning signs and recovery possibilities. "It's scary," admitted Sarah Chun, a 20-year-old who had been held for 8 months before the rescue. "But if telling my story helps save one other girl, then the fear is worth it." Jack offered perspective gained through decades of public attention. "Fame can be a tool for good, but it changes how people see you forever. Make sure you're choosing this path for the right reasons." Dorothy arrived with homemade cookies and maternal wisdom that had become central to the group's emotional foundation. "Whatever you decide, this community will support you," she assured them. "Your courage has already changed how we protect our children." Frank provided tactical insights about media security and privacy protection, his military background helping survivors understand how to maintain personal safety while sharing their experiences publicly. The discussion revealed the depth of healing that had occurred over the past year. These young women were no longer just survivors, but advocates who understood their power to prevent others from experiencing similar trauma. "I used to have nightmares about being trapped," Maria shared. "Now I dream about becoming a trauma nurse who helps other survivors heal." Jack reflected on the circular nature of healing. Victims becoming advocates, advocates becoming protectors, protectors creating communities where future victims might never be created at all. As the meeting concluded, the survivors formed their traditional closing circle, holding hands while sharing affirmations that had evolved from simple survival mantras to declarations of purpose and hope. "We are not broken," they recited together. "We are not defined by our past. We choose our future. We protect each other. We make the world safer for those who come after us." Jack bowed respectfully as the circle dissolved, knowing that these women had found something more valuable than justice. They had discovered the power to transform their trauma into protection for others. Outside, Cedar Falls continued its peaceful evening routine, unaware that heroes walked among them disguised as ordinary citizens who had simply chosen to care more than was comfortable or convenient. 2 years after the rescue, Jack received an unexpected visitor at the training facility, a young federal agent whose nervous energy reminded him of Morrison, but whose eyes carried the idealism that corruption had never touched. Agent David Park had been assigned to investigate reports of a new trafficking network operating in the Pacific Northwest, using methods that seemed familiar to those who had studied Stone's operation. "We think someone is copying Stone's playbook," Agent Park explained, spreading photographs and intelligence reports across Jack's desk. Small-town police departments, missing persons cases that go nowhere, and victims who disappear without leaving digital trails. Jack studied the evidence with growing concern, recognizing patterns that triggered memories of their desperate battle against Stone's network. The new operation showed sophistication that suggested leadership by someone who had learned from Stone's mistakes rather than simply imitating his methods. "Have you talked to Stone?" Jack asked, knowing that the imprisoned trafficker had been cooperating with federal authorities in exchange for better prison conditions. "That's the disturbing part," Agent Park replied. "Stone claims he never shared his operational methods with anyone, but these crimes show insider knowledge that had to come from somewhere." Lisa joined the conversation, her expertise in trafficking operations providing insights that federal training couldn't match. "Stone had lieutenants who were never caught," she observed. "Maybe someone with inside knowledge decided to restart the business." The possibility that their victory had been incomplete sent chills through Jack's carefully constructed sense of closure. They had rescued 49 victims and dismantled Stone's immediate network, but criminal organizations adapted and evolved when faced with law enforcement pressure. Frank entered with intelligence from his military contacts that confirmed their worst fears. Border Patrol reports unusual patterns of movement that matched trafficking routes Stone used. Someone is definitely operating from his blueprint. Jack realized that their work in Cedar Falls represented just one battle in a war that would continue as long as evil people sought to profit from human suffering. The training programs they had developed, the awareness they had created, and the survivors they had empowered were tools in an ongoing fight rather than final solutions. "What do you need from us?" Jack asked Agent Park, already knowing that their expertise would be requested for the new investigation. "Everything," Park replied honestly. "Your tactical knowledge, the survivors' insights, and the community response model you've developed here. We're facing an enemy who learned from Stone's failures." Lisa immediately volunteered to consult on victim identification and recovery protocols, her experience providing perspectives that no federal textbook could supply. "The survivors here are ready to help," she added. "They understand that protecting others is part of their own healing process." Dorothy offered the resources of her missing persons advocacy network, which had grown to include families from 12 states who shared information and provided mutual support during investigations. "We've learned to recognize patterns that law enforcement sometimes misses." She explained that Frank's tactical expertise would prove invaluable for training federal teams in the community-based approach that had proven so effective in Cedar Falls. "Stone's people are operating in small towns because they think rural communities are easy targets," he observed. "Time to prove them wrong." Jack found himself facing a choice that echoed the decision he had made in Mel's Diner 2 years earlier. He could remain safely in Cedar Falls, protecting the community he had already saved, or venture into new dangers to protect strangers who had no one else to advocate for them. "When do we leave?" Jack asked, his decision reflecting the same moral code that had driven him to protect Dorothy from 3 corrupt officers who had seemed like nothing more than bullies. Agent Park's relief was visible as he realized the legendary martial artist was willing to emerge from retirement once again. "The transport leaves tomorrow morning. We're heading to Oregon, where 3 girls have vanished in the past month." As they planned their departure, Jack reflected on how his understanding of heroism had evolved. Fame and recognition meant nothing compared to the knowledge that somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, teenage girls waited for rescue that might never come without their intervention. The legend of Jackie Chan was about to expand beyond Cedar Falls, carrying with it lessons learned through pain, victory earned through sacrifice, and hope sustained through community. 5 years after that Tuesday morning in Mel's Diner, Jack stood in the Cedar Falls Crisis Response Training Facility, watching Lisa conduct an advanced seminar for law enforcement officers from across the western United States. The facility had become a national model, with graduates carrying their training to communities where trafficking networks had previously operated with impunity. The memorial wall now displayed over 300 photographs, survivors whose rescues had resulted from techniques and awareness programs developed in their small Montana town. Each face represented not just a life saved, but a family reunited and a future restored through community action and professional dedication. That Jack's role had evolved beyond instructor to consultant, traveling regularly to assist federal operations, while maintaining his base in the community that had given his retirement years meaning beyond anything fame had ever provided. His apartment above Henderson's Hardware remained unchanged, but the shrine on his desk now included photos of survivors who had become advocates, students who had become teachers, and communities that had transformed from vulnerable to vigilant. Lisa approached with the morning's correspondence, her position as National Director of Survivor Services requiring constant travel, but always bringing her home to Cedar Falls. Invitation from the Attorney General, she reported with a smile. They want you to address the International Conference on Human Trafficking Prevention. Jack nodded while reviewing intelligence reports from Agent Park, whose investigation had led to the dismantling of 3 major trafficking networks using methods they had pioneered. The work never ended, but each victory created ripple effects that prevented countless future crimes. Dorothy entered with fresh coffee and news from her expanding advocacy network, which now included families from 43 states who shared information and coordinated search efforts when loved ones disappeared. The Rodriguez family wants to establish a scholarship fund, she announced. Full college tuition for trafficking survivors who want to study social work or criminal justice. Frank joined them from the Tactical Training Center, where his morning session had included FBI agents, Border Patrol officers, and local police chiefs learning to recognize trafficking operations disguised as legitimate businesses. Senator Williams wants to introduce federal legislation mandating our training protocols for all law enforcement agencies, he reported. Jack felt deep satisfaction in the program's expanding influence, but his greatest joy remained in the individual transformations he witnessed daily. Amanda had graduated from the FBI Academy and was leading trafficking investigations in 3 states. Maria had become head nurse of a trauma center that specialized in treating survivors. Jenny Rodriguez's counseling practice had expanded into a regional network serving hundreds of families. The original survivors want to plan a reunion, Lisa mentioned, checking her calendar. 5 years seems like an appropriate milestone to celebrate how far we've all come. Jack smiled at the thought of seeing the women who had first taught him that surviving trauma required courage, but thriving afterward demanded community support and shared purpose. Their transformation from victims to advocates had inspired everything that followed. Through the window, Cedar Falls continued its peaceful routine, but Jack knew that beneath the surface, a network of trained citizens remained vigilant for signs that evil might be threatening the vulnerable. Stone's legacy of corruption had been replaced by a community commitment to protection that extended far beyond their small town. That Jack's phone buzzed with a text from Agent Park. New operation in Texas. Could use your expertise. 3-day commitment. Maximum. Jack showed the message to his team, knowing they would support whatever decision he made. At 74, he could have chosen comfortable retirement, but the faces on the memorial wall reminded him that age was just a number when innocent lives hung in the balance. Road trip, Lisa asked with the same courage that had driven her to return. To a burning building to save strangers. Road trip, Jack confirmed, knowing that somewhere in Texas, families were praying for heroes they didn't know existed as he prepared for another mission. Jack touched the jade pendant that had carried him through countless dangers. His daughter's memory lived on not in the photographs on his desk, but in every life he helped save, every family he helped reunite, every community he helped protect. Jack Chun, maintenance worker and legendary martial artist, had found his true calling at last. Not as a celebrity entertaining millions, but as a guardian protecting those who needed someone to care more than was comfortable or convenient. The legend of Jackie Chan would continue, not through movies or publicity, but through the quiet heroism of ordinary people who chose to protect their neighbors when evil threatened their communities. In Cedar Falls and beyond, his greatest stunts were still being performed by survivors who had learned that true strength protects the innocent, and today, they were all learning to be strong. If you liked the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.